Hi there, welcome back to the Car UK channel. Right, in this video we're going to talk about another terrible engine. In fact, I'm going to put this possibly as one of the worst engines in existence currently. And it is fitted into a number of modern vehicles, and particularly in the used market, it is absolutely plaguing used market and garages with its unreliability. So what is the worst engine and possibly one of the most unreliable in the used vehicle sector at the moment? Well, it is a 1.2 petrol engine, otherwise known as a HR1 DDT engine, or HRA2 for short. Now this is actually a Renault/Nissan collaboration engine. Now bear in mind that Nissan are actually owned by Renault currently, so they do share a number of engines and collaborative platforms that have been going on for, well, over a decade. Now this engine started out life in 2012 and is in a number of Renaults and Nissan products. It's in quite a few of the Renaults, but more commonly you'll see it in things like the Nissan Qashqai and the Nissan Juke. It was fitted to the Qashqais and Jukes from around 2014 onwards. As mentioned, it's a 1.2 petrol engine fitted with a turbocharger, all aluminium block, and is actually timing chain driven. Now that might surprise some people, because usually on this channel, when we are sort of being a bit unfriendly about certain engines which are unreliable, the two most common that spring to mind are the Ford EcoBoost and the 1.2 PureTech engine. One's fitted to the Ford range and the other fitted to the Vauxhall's Peugeot Citroën range. And the reason these engines are predominantly unreliable is the fact that they use wet belts. Basically, without going into too many details, oil and rubber is not a good mix, and they basically break up, clog the engines up, and are just riddled with faults and other issues. If you haven't checked out those videos and how bad they are, you can find them in the end screen. But this engine actually is not a wet belt driven engine, or even a cam belt driven engine at all. It doesn't have a wet belt or a dry cam belt either. It actually has a timing chain, which might surprise some people, because usually when people say a timing chain on a car, it usually means that it's fine, it'll never go wrong, they're super reliable, chains never go wrong. And that really isn't the case, because there are a number of vehicles, and not just this engine in particular, which are plagued with chain issues. And that can be down to all sorts of things, such as poor build quality and design of the actual chain itself, or sometimes they have bad oil consumption, which means the chains stretch over time, and in some cases can actually cause complete engine failure. And you won't be surprised to know that this engine, this 1.2 turbo engine fitted to the Nissan Juke, the Nissan Qashqai, Renaults such as the Capture, the Megane, the Scenic, is plagued with chain issues, amongst other things as well. I have seen, as a dealer and also as a garage owner as well for the last few years, countless amounts of these Nissan Jukes, Nissan Qashqais and the Renault ranges coming into the garages with complete engine failure. In fact, I get offered Nissan Jukes and Qashqais, as these are usually the most common vehicle that the engine was fitted to, being offered to me all the time with complete engine failure or absolutely rattling its brains out because of timing chains that have slipped and moved, just fall to pieces, and the engine is completely kaput. And half the time they don't give you any warning whatsoever. But it's not just timing chains as well that this engine is plagued with, it also suffers with horrific oil consumption problems. Now this is well documented, and unfortunately it's down to a design flaw. The actual piston rings of the car are actually too small for the diameter of the bore, so oil basically seeps past them and burns away. This is something that Nissan is actually aware of, and apparently in later engines it supposedly has fixed it, although I have seen later engines with exactly the same fault, i.e. burning oil using too much oil consumption. We've also seen this engine suffering with head gasket failure as well, so overheating, probably not helped by the fact that the engine is completely all aluminium. Throw that in with oil burning all the time as well, and also problems with the piston rings, loss of compression, and as well timing chains that can just literally just completely destroy themselves at a moment's notice. This is not an engine that I would recommend to anyone. So I'll put a list here of the models where this engine is fitted to. The only caveat I'll put in here is that be careful with some of the early Renault ranges, so Clios and some of the Dacias. They did do a 1.2 engine in that, non-turbocharged engines. That is not the same engine we're talking about here. The older 1.2, normally aspirated engines you found in Clios and stuff, that's a completely different engine. On the Renaults, it's usually badged TSE. In the Nissans or the Jukes, if it's just a 1.2 DIG engine, that will be fitted with the HRA2 engine. For me at the moment, I've decided that these are now my number one most unreliable engine, and that takes some beating to get past the Ford EcoBoost as well, I might add. Now, it'll be fair to say that this engine has been well documented about these failures, and obviously Nissan and Renault will be aware of this, and they have made improvements to the engine. In fact, from about 2019 onwards, the engine did radically change. But I am still seeing issues with later engines. I've seen 20 plates, Nissans going down with this problem, head gasket failures, still burning oil, and even some with noisy timing chains. So I wouldn't say that even with the revisions, which I'm sure have made some difference, but it has eradicated the issue. Personally, if you're going to be buying some of the older Nissan Qashqais or Nissan Dukes, I would go for maybe either the diesel, if you can accommodate that, depending where you live. 1.5 diesel was very, very good. Or they did have the 1.6 naturally aspirated engine. Yes, it's probably not going to be as economical as a 1.2 version, but it is a solid old lumpy engine and very, very reliable. Later on, unfortunately, the engine choices really were a 1.6 diesel or the 1.2 engine as we're speaking about now. And I just wouldn't recommend either of those engines, which is a real shame because the Nissan Qashqai and Dukes are actually really popular cars. With such a flawed engine under its bonnet, you just cannot take the risk in buying one. Now, what happens if you actually own one of these vehicles? Well, if it's running fine at the moment, I wouldn't panic too much. But if you are starting to see sort of high oil consumption problems or anything like that, that is a sign possibly that you might want to be getting rid. Also as well, any sort of weird strange noises when you're starting up, that could be the sign of timing chain failure coming down the tracks. And usually on these, if you're starting to get chain noises on startup, you can rest assured that it will deteriorate very, very quickly. Personally, I say any issue with these engines, I will just not get involved with them. I'll be trying to get rid of them quickly. I actually think there's a lot better alternatives out there as well. Alternatives to the sort of Nissan Duke and Qashqais as an example, because that's where predominantly this engine was fitted. Look at alternatives from vehicles such as you've got the Hyundais and the Kias, the Sportages. iX35s are obviously very good cars. Suzuki Vitaras always get overlooked. 1.6 petrols in particular are very, very good. Even the diesel's quite good, although it does feel a little bit agricultural. And of course, a lot of the Volkswagen ranges as well. You've got all the Seat ranges as well, the Atecas and stuff like that. Things like the Skoda Kodiaq as well. There's lots of other alternatives out there. Offer that small performance engine with a little bit of power that aren't plagued with these issues that are faced with this 1.2 turbocharged Nissan Renault HRA2 engine. By the way, this is a real shame as well to say this, because at the moment Nissan has not been having the best of times at the moment. They're in really poor shape at the moment market-wise. Say they've got massive profit warnings, and obviously they're making massive cuts around the world, potentially on the brink of bankruptcy as well, which is not great. And when you think back, going back, 15 so years ago, just over 15 years ago, Nissan actually, with its Qashqai, when it first came out, changed the way we looked at medium-sized vehicles, or created that SUV market, particularly in Europe. The Qashqai was an absolute revelation when it came out. It took the market by storm and was really the market leader for about 4 or 5 years. But sadly, it did sort of lose its way as everybody else caught up and basically overtook it. And this engine has no doubt played those sales. I certainly think it has anyway, in my view. That unreliability of that engine is not going to help. And it is an engine already that is being touted around the motor trade as one that we all are avoiding. And like I said, with ongoing issues as well, if you have problems with these engines, if the chain falls off or they start burning oil, in reality, I'll be straight with you, they are very, very difficult to rebuild. In fact, I can't find really anyone who wants to get involved in rebuilding these engines. The used market, trying to find second-hand engines, I mean, you really won't want to take a chance on one. And if you do, they are astronomical even for a half-decent running engine. But there's no guarantee when you fitted that it's going to give longevity to a customer. It's just a badly designed engine, in my view, riddled with issues, and absolutely should be avoided. So there you are. That is my new number one unreliable engine currently you can buy in the used car market. So thank you for watching this one. Let me know your comments as well. Do you agree? Maybe you've had one and it's been absolutely fine. I'd like to hear that as well, because it's not all bad. Doesn't mean that every single engine is plagued with faults. So you had some good experience or bad experience, let me know in those comments. And if you've got any suggestions as well of any other engines that you think as well might be as unreliable as this HRA2 engine, then please let me know in the comments as well. Thanks again for watching this one, and I'll see you all in the next one.